Welcome, everyone, to the Squid and Ultimate Leaf Fan Show. I'm Mike Wilson, the Ultimate Leafs fan. With me, as always, my wearing rookie Squid 5. Squid, I guess we shouldn't be surprised we're previewing a Game 5 the way this playoff run has gone for Montreal. What are you going to do?
We shouldn't be one bit surprised whatsoever, Mike. I mean, it's just this team just doesn't seem to want to go away. I mean, and they've done it in every series. I mean, it's just unbelievable. And I mean, I don't anticipate them winning Game 5 and bringing it back to Montreal. But then again, I've said that all along, and it's been happening. So who knows?
Well, we have said before each game that Montreal, to have a chance, has to play aggressive physically, which they did. Price has to make some key saves, which he did. Patiently wait for a break or a turnover, which they did, but especially and critically, they have to stay out of the box, which they didn't do, but they still survived.
Yeah, well, I mean, their penalty killing has been good throughout
awesome.
The entire playoffs.
Got a lot of practice.
I mean, it's been really good. But when you're facing the top power play in the playoffs, I mean, they're going at about 40%, I think now, maybe a little under that after the last game. I mean, eventually it's going to come back to bite you if you're going to take penalties. And I think more importantly than anything else, I think that's the one thing that they have to do. Yeah, they have to play the other style. They got to play physical. They got to wait for their breaks. They got to play good defensive hockey. But more importantly, they do have to stay out of the box because you're not going to keep Tampa's power play off the board for an entire game, 2 in a row. It's just not going to happen.
Well, I can say this to you, though, Squid. The other night, for the first time in the playoffs, that the Lightning looked like the desperate team in overtime. Now, that's a pretty bold, some would say stupid thing to say with the team up 3-0 and with the man advantage. But you could sense the body language of the Tampa players, both on the ice and on the bench, with almost a 3-minute power play to start the overtime. They were looking like this is our only chance to win. They were fumbling pucks, missing passes, taking desperation shots, looking nothing like the juggernaut power play we've seen, all used to seeing. And of course, the inevitable happens. Thus, here we are talking about Game 5.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know what? But I mean, I've been there, Mike.
Yeah, I was just going to ask you that.
And, I know the feeling. And, all of a sudden your power play is not working. You have a chance to win the game and finish the other team off. And it's like, and then all of a sudden you're fumbling around. You're not able to score. You're making mistakes. And I got to tell you, it gets to you after a while and you're thinking, oh, gosh. Like, we don't want to go back home and play again game 5 and have to win it at home. And if we don't, then we got to come back here. Like, all these things are going through your mind, while you're sitting there watching. And then when you get on the ice, it's hard to perform because you've got all these thoughts going through your head and instead of thinking about what I got to do when I get on the ice.
Okay, so let's just pick it up from there and carry a little bit further. You can sense you're a player and as a coach, you have both sides of this. You're sitting on the bench, you're watching this unfold on the ice. You're looking on the bench as some of the hits start to slump forward out of desperation and out of, all of a sudden the worry is creeping up. All of a sudden, Montreal, on the other hand, you can feel this resurgence of energy coming to them. So as a coach or a player, how can you prevent this from sort of crippling the team? Timeout, which they did, but
I'll be honest with you, Mike. It's very, very difficult. It really is. I mean, it's. I don't even know how to describe it. I guess it's kind of like an avalanche. Like once it starts going, it's pretty hard to stop. And when your players start getting that feeling inside of them, it's hard to convince them otherwise because that's all they're thinking about. I mean, you got to be a masterful psychologist in between periods and before the game and after the game in order to get your team to perform at peak performance. And I think John Cooper is one of those guys that can get that done.
Well, look, we got to take it a step further. Now, we'll ask Change Matter tonight. Let's look at another thing. Clearly, Montreal's deep plan is just to headhunt Kucherov and Point, get them off their game. Weber especially has made that his only priority with some real borderline hits or attempted hits. I mean, one the other night, I think, as we talked about off air, he'd hit Point that one time, Point would still be in Montreal plastered to the board. But it's open season on these guys, not surprisingly. Still.
No, I mean, that's the thing. I mean, going into the playoffs, and especially when you get to the finals, you know that the referees are looking, and they're looking and they're letting things go that they normally would call in the regular season, maybe in the first round. But as you go along, it's kind of like prison rules, really, when you think about it in the finals. And Montreal's trying to do everything they can to take advantage of those rules. It's seemingly not working so far. I think tonight, having the last shift is really going to benefit Tampa Bay because they can keep Danault away from their top line, and they can try and get their top line out there when Weber and Sherratt and those guys aren't on the ice, and maybe Romanoff and those guys are on the ice, and then then it's advantage Tampa for sure.
Well, I mean, it's also maybe a simple case of going back to the Fred Shiro days with Boston, and of course, certainly not Bobby or even in the same breath any of those defensemen. But the idea is make him handle the puck all night and tire himself out. So instead of trying to make plays at the blue line, maybe not make the Montreal D chase the puck and dump it in their corners, and at least for a period to make them handle it. And I think if you're in Montreal, you want to keep the energy level high, but Tampa, you better come up with some sort of game plan to thwart what they're doing, because you can see obviously what it is.
Well, I think if you look at the first three games, especially the first two, I mean, that's what Tampa did. They didn't screw around at the blue lines and try to make fancy plays and everything. They were getting the puck past their D, and they were getting on them very, very quickly, and they were hitting them. They were turning pucks over, retrieving those loose pucks, and then making plays. You didn't see that in the fourth game. You didn't see that much at all. You kind of saw them trying to one-on-one guys at the blue line, getting pucks, poked off their sticks, and Montreal going in the opposite direction from there. So they got to get back to their game, and if they do, they're a very, very, very dangerous team because they can get on you quick. They can turn pucks over in a hurry, but when they turn pucks over, they can do damage with those turnovers for sure.
Well, I mean, that's the Montreal game plan, and they're doing that. They're taking the puck, dumping it, making it making the Tampa D handle the puck, and even Hedman's been turning it over a little bit, and the energy level stays high. We could be talking about Game 6 Friday night.
Well, Montreal has no other choice but to play that way. I mean, they don't have the depth that Tampa Bay has. It's not even close. I mean, they've got to play that way. They have no other choice. But I really believe Tampa has to play that way tonight if they want to finish this off tonight. I think they got to get pucks behind their D and get after them. And you got guys like Gord and Point and all these guys that are as fast as hell. They can get in on those guys and force them and finish their checks on them, turn pucks over. Then everything else just falls into place because they're a very, very talented team and they can do a lot of damage when they pick up loose pucks.
Well, we'll watch obviously with interest as we always do. But Squid, now it's time to put your GM hat on for a minute. A couple weeks from now, you're faced with a starting line. We're going to talk about the Leafs, of course. You're faced with a starting forward lineup consistent of the following. I mean, and these are the signed forwards that are, to be clear, so we're not talking about any other sort of scenario. So line 1, you have 2 players. You have Matthews and Marner. Line 2, you have Tavares and Nylander. Line 3, we'll say that Kerfoot, Mikhailov, and Engvall are there. And the fourth line is Spezza, Simmons, and Brooks. And that leaves you Nick Robinson. I mean, there are a number of other players that are out there with the Marlies, and a couple they're bringing in. We have not seen them play, so they're hard to judge, but they're going to be training camp sort of players that may surprise, which you always look for. Even Rodin Amarov, that's their first pick, the kid from the Russian kid who played exceptionally well last year, and it was their first pick. He may get a look, but where do you go from here?
Well, it's going to be a bit of a mountain to climb from here, I believe. I mean, I think you're at the bottom of Mount Everest and you're trying to get to the top. Unfortunately, there's a lot of roadblocks in the way, and that is salary. And I mean, there's some good free agent forwards out there that would fit in
Yeah,
very, very nicely with the Leafs and fill in their third and fourth lines and even their second line. But they can't afford those guys.
that's
And we're talking about guys like Coleman and
yeah.
Goudreau and guys like that that are excellent players and good playoff players that would fill those roles. Unfortunately, they don't have the money to spend to get those guys. And I mean, I don't see anything barring, and again, I hate to harp on it, but barring a trade of one or two of the top four guys, you're not going to see Toronto signing any of those pretty decent free agents for
Well,
sure.
and what adds to this puzzle, and this, I guess the bad part of this is Zach Hyman doesn't come back. The threat of losing Engvall or Kerfoot in the expansion draft. You have a goalie problem you got to deal with. All that has to be addressed.
Mm-hmm.
And then you got to try and fill the forward spot. So I'm guessing the priority should be number one. You got to have your one line has to have a player to fill that role of Hyman if they can't bring Hyman back to help these guys. And you need a gritty forward to take the burden off Tavares. Now the question comes, do you promote within? They may not have any other option.
Well, I mean that is the obvious option for them right now because they can't go any other way. However, I think in the entry draft, I think you're going to see. I think you're going to see some action, Mike. I really do. I don't think that they have any other option, to be quite honest with you, going forward if they want to become, the team that they want to become. They got to keep guys like Hyman. They got to get more guys like him. That's what Mike Foligno. I mean, Nick Foligno. There's another guy. I mean, he's a perfect type of player for them to fill out their forwards, but he's also a free agent. So,
but he makes $5.5 million bucks.
Yeah, exactly. He's going to want 6, or he might take 5, but he's going to want 7 years, and he's in his 30s. I mean, again, there's just so many roadblocks between where they want to get to and where they are now that, the only option I see right now is you're going to have to play a whole lot of young guys and hope that, like hell, that they can play in the National Hockey League and play well.
Well, they got to find their top borders. If for the old timers, you can remember the 1993 or 92 World Series when the Jays won, and Pat Borders, the catcher, came out of nowhere and was World Series MVP. And that's the anomaly of sports, that you always are surprised with that player who comes out, emerges from nowhere. Yeah. But they're heading to camp at that risk. Do you really want to do that? I would have to suggest no. The free agent list, as we know, is slim pickings in their price range. So on the surface, the plan is going to be to acquire a number of players again, as they have the last few years, an $800,000 to $900,000 range, and let them compete for those spots. And really, the trade route is as you've mentioned, is the only other alternative.
Yeah, and I honestly, I mean, I can sit here and I can say that I believe something will happen, and I believe it will happen at the draft, and it'll involve one or two of the top 4 players. Like I say, I don't think they have any other option if they want to get, the separation between the number 1 line and the number 4 line a little closer together. And then they got to shore up their defense, don't forget. So, and then they got the goaltending problem.
Yeah, these are all the things we got to do.
It's not one thing or 2 things. It's 3 things that they got to deal with and 3 things that they got to shore up. And, without cap room, there's no other way to do it than to move money and get it out of there.
This is certainly not a Betty Crocker recipe where you just add water. This is going to be a little more difficult than that. There's a few more ingredients that have to go in. But on that note, Squid, it's crunch time again. And keeping with our newfound 4-week tradition of inspirational messages, today's we leave one from Herbert Swoop for Kyle Dubas. You ready?
And who is Herbert Swoop?
Why would you ask me that? I'm not going to know that.
Okay, but I want to hear the wisdom that he has.
Here it is. I can't give you a surefire formula for success, but I can give you a formula for failure. Try to please everyone. Not
kind
bad.
of interesting.
It's got to, you got
Kind
to
of a
think
little
about it.
it's a little tickler there, like it kind of gets you
Yeah,
going and thinking,
you got to think a little bit on that one, okay? And that's what we got. Look, we got a very
yeah,
educated audience, so why not? They're a lot smarter
like
than
the
we are.
squid has his tentacles going all over the place here now, wondering
All over the
what the
place.
hell was that all about?
That's exactly right. So now, listen, everyone. Thanks for listening to us. We'll be back again on Monday to give you a wrap. Well, we'll give you a wrap up on the Stanley Cup champion, whoever that might be at that point. Don't forget to listen to this week's podcast with ex-Buffalo Sabre and ex-coach of Squid, Rick Dudley.
Mm-hmm.
Drops Friday at 6 p.m. Enjoy the game or the games over the next few days, and we'll talk to you guys next week.
Mike, don't say games, please.
Yes, exactly. Games. Have to keep it all open. You never know.
Yeah.